And yeah, since it is the top of the hour, we will go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us for today's masterclass hosted by FamilyOfficeList.org, soon to be Family Office Access. We're excited to share more about that later. I'm Danielle Patterson, CEO at Family Office List, and I am very excited and honored to welcome you to today's session. Our guest today is Richard Wolkowitz, founder of Xylogenesis Family Office Advisory. He is an expert in modernizing family offices while preserving their core values. With a career spanning law, business, family enterprise, and advisory roles, Richard brings a rare inside-out perspective on what makes family offices work across generations. Today, we'll be discussing how family offices are adapting to new challenges, leadership transitions, and operational shifts, while staying true to their core missions. Before we dive right in, a few housekeeping items. I see you've all discovered the chat, and that is a wonderful way for you to introduce yourselves, stay connected, and network. But we make these live so that we can include you all in our conversation, and we would love for you to engage with us, to share your questions. If you haven't yet found, there is a separate Q&A. For those not familiar with Zoom, you will see a little bubble with a question mark. So that is the Q&A. I'm going to launch mine, so it will be open here. And I will do my best to monitor that and fold your questions into our conversation. And again, we had some technical difficulties. There were at one point for Danielle Patterson. So I apologize to Richard that his name shows my name, but this is Richard. And thank you so much for being with us today, Richard, sharing your wisdom with us.
Danielle, it's great to be here, honored, and can't wait to learn more about Family Office Access as Family Office List evolves too.
Yeah, well, thank you. Excited to share more. And I thought for those who are new to your work, new to the family office sector, we could really start with just a bit more conversation, or I'm sorry, a bit more context. So I guess for those brand new to your work, I would love if you could share a high-level introduction to your work at Xylogenesis Family Office Advisory.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. We take a very different approach to family office. Family office means so many things to different people, and we'll get into the background of what I did. But what does Xylogenesis do? We work on to accomplish three things, and it's really kind of simple: healthy, generational continuity. That's our goal. That's what we help families do to try and achieve that. There's a lot of complexity on how you get there, but our goal is really healthy generational continuity, full of being supportive of a multidisciplinary advisory practice that every family office has. That's what I call kind of the technical work, the left brain work. The right brain work is the family dynamics, and how you weave that together, the technical matters that impact families with the family dynamics, understanding the systems that are involved. That's what we do. We get deep into it, not just from a strategic point of view, which we do, but also from an implementation point of view and helping the families carry through generationally.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that your work is so nuanced and complex, but you just broke that down in a very kind of easy, overarching way. And you said it, family office means something so different to everyone. And so I'd be curious, it's a fun question to ask all my guests, is how do you define a family office in your line of work and beyond?
So this is where it gets a little complex, but I think we can try and make it simple. So family office, just those two words, right? That can mean a lot of different things. And the way I look at it is, first, family office means that we're coming together as a family and we're trying to do something, right? Something either business or personal related. Usually G1 starts out in a business way, but it's usually some wealth, liquidity, investments, and they're trying to figure out how to manage it. So first is like family office means coming together to help support the family system beyond the traditional manner in an organized way. From there, it kind of forks out into a couple different approaches. First is like, what are the services we're trying to provide? What are we actually doing? And so many, as they first start out, and maybe it's a continuum, they evolve. They first start out as a hold company, a hold co, right? It's there as an entity, It's there to centralize something, and then from there, it does something. So then what is it actually doing? Most are handling wealth and investments. So then you might say our family office is really either a holding company, where it may hold and have ownership interests in operating entities. It may hold our own interests in investment and wealth portfolios. From that, so then you could say, well, we have a hold company type model, or we have a finance or wealth management model. It could be an operating model because we're operating things and doing things. So that's how I begin to look at what is a family office. But then the other half of the spoke is you've heard all these things about single family office, multifamily office, virtual, hybrid, embedded family office. So that's actually the structure of the office and the services that are being provided. So to me, when you say family office, it can mean lots of things. So the question is, you need to probe. And what I find when I talk with families who actually have family offices, and I say, what type of family office do you have? They even can't describe, are they a hold company? Are they a wealth management firm? Are they an investment company? Are they a tax advisory firm? Are they providing personal services? And then are those services done in a single family way, a multifamily way? Is it embedded in their operating company? Is it virtual hybrid, performing some services inside, some outside? So really stopping the conversation, really trying to define who we are as a family, what services we're providing, and then the model for delivering those services is the complexity to beginning of what is a family office.
So no one size fits all. I'm sure none of your clients really are quite the same. So you're really crafting these bespoke solutions based on their immediate needs. But I imagine it must be evolving as, like you said, the younger generation steps in, the businesses, the investment, the focus changes. So yeah, your work is very dynamic. You're probably every day is a new day, and I'm excited to learn more. So the name, I did a deep dive and I pulled out ChatGPT to learn what xylogenesis means, and I think it's beautiful. And I'd love to hear how you came up with the name, and for maybe share with others who don't know the definition what it means.
Sure. So starting this work as an independent advisory firm about 3 years ago, I really wanted to have a name that meant something that I could use as a tool and families could really think about and resonate with. And calling it Rich Consulting Co. didn't seem to be that kind of model. Family office list was already taken, so I had to come up with something. So Xylogenesis kind of hit me in the head. By background, I'm an ag econ major. That's what I got my undergraduate degree in. And I was always interested in how agriculture moves the world economies and how it supports countries and regions. And so I was always fascinated by it. And I had to take a horticulture course where I learned about this concept of xylogenesis. And it came back to me 30 years later while I'm putting this business together. And it really dawned on me that xylogenesis is the process of tree ring creation. So if you've ever cut a tree in half and you see those rings, that's the process of xylogenesis, creating those rings, which to me is a perfect metaphor for families. Because when you cut a tree in half, and every tree in half, and you look at them, all those tree rings are very different, like a family. You
Wow.
also notice in a younger tree, right? Maybe I'm getting too esoteric,
Oh,
but I
I
think it's a
love
great metaphor, and I can tell you a story on how I even use it. But so as a tree starts out, the caliper size of the tree, the thickness of the tree, if you cut a really tiny tree down, you'll notice that the tree rings are perfectly concentric, perfectly round, evenly spaced out, just like a family. When you have a child or two, the family's really close. The tree rings, just like the family, are very perfect, very concentric. But what happens to a tree as it ages? As it gets those rings, there's external forces that impact it. There's there's wind, drought, fire. It cracks, bends those tree rings. As the tree goes older in age, the tree rings grow further apart and are not concentric anymore. Just
wow.
like a family that grows, you get your big wheel, right? Then you get your bike, then you get your car keys, then you go to college, then you get a job, then you get married. Might get live in a different city from where you grew up, just like your siblings, your cousins, your parents, your grandparents. You start to grow further apart, and external forces impact a family system. Likewise, birth, death, divorce, business cycles, industry changes. So it's a great metaphor for families, and I really believe that tree rings are the first language on the planet because it really tells so much, and it's a really deep thing that I use as a metaphor, and I really help families use that as a tool.
I am in love with that. So anyone who follows me on LinkedIn, I draw so much inspiration from nature, and I think nature is our greatest teacher. And so I'm always using metaphors. And so I love the name, I love the metaphor, and I didn't know, about your past and what you studied. And that's actually my kind of my next area to ask. I do know you have a very impressive career. You worked in law in the White House and at the top law firms. How did that work evolve into now working with family offices?
Sure. So my background and upbringing really happened. This Xylogenesis firm happened organically. So I grew up. I'm part of a fifth gen St. Louis family, part of a three-generation family office. So I grew up as a next gener, watching my father, who was the leader of it, and one of my closest and maybe my best friend, besides my wife and my kids, and a great mentor and colleague of mine. So I watched him lead prolific business and complex families growing up. And he practiced law as well before he joined the family. So I thought it was a good idea for me to go to law school, and I did. And then, besides having my father as a great role model and leader, then the first boss I had after that was the President of the United States. So I had the opportunity to work on a piece of legislation, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and was a lawyer in the White House on that. And so, really, those kind of seminal moments really helped prepare me for what I do today, because part of what we do as advisors, speaking to family office members, you can't really find more powerful, more influential people than that. But growing up watching my father, he was just my dad to me. I saw other people get really nervous and wanting to talk to him. And I never really understood why, because we're all just people. And I took that same approach when I worked in the White House. When I ended up practicing law afterwards, I took that same approach with my clients. So it was just a very organic process. And when I practiced law, my area was M&A and international and general business. And so, being a business lawyer for clients really allowed me to start talking more business with them. When I became not just their business lawyer, but their outside general counsel handling all legal matters, it then was important that I really get to know the business. And you can't get to know the business by sitting on this side of the screen or sitting in your office. You have to be in the factory, in the fields, working with your clients and their employees hand in hand. So I really learned their businesses very intimately. And so once I became their lawyer and then their business advisor and then their confidant, because they started sharing their hopes, dreams, fears, aspirations with me, they would eventually say to me, Rich, we want to focus on our family and we want to focus on our business. So can you begin to help coordinate for us all this other stuff that adds complexity to our lives? Those things are their tax planning, their accounting, their audit work, their banking, their investment banking, their insurance, their real estate, helping them implement their estate plans. So I really became a multidisciplinary advisor in my practice of law at a time in the 1990s and early 2000s when family office didn't really exist. So looking back today, really I served as outside CEO to family offices before they really formalized, and which was great training, because eventually I became the successor to my family in our family office. So then I pivoted from law and representing a lot of families to being captive for my own family, which was a great honor. And 15 years into it, we had a liquidity event and we began to wind up and wrap up our affairs. We decided not to move forward to G4 as a family. And then when that happened, I had an opportunity to work with two prolific families in different cities to help start up and lead their family offices. So then I had a new lens as a non-family CEO. So I had all those different lenses, from a next gener to a lawyer to a principal to a non-family CEO, really helped shape Xylogenesis and what families I think really need and the gap in the market for them.
Wow. What an amazing, remarkable journey and just so many lived experiences. I mean, you wear so many hats, and I don't think you would have any of that opportunity if you didn't earn their trust. And I like that you said a lot of your inspiration came from your father and the way that he led and, just how you show up. And I do have to say, once Ron introduced us and I started learning more about your work and talking about how excited I was to have you on, every person that knows of your work and has, signed up and is excited to hear from you has the most amazing things to say about you. And I as well. I mean, you're so generous with your wisdom. I loved hearing about the way you father your children and just kind of have been a father to many of their friends. And it's very admirable. I can see why you've had so much success and why these families trust you. I think it probably just morphs if you earn that trust and you're good at one area, and really that you needing to know everything inside out, you really invest into these families. They're very lucky to have your wisdom to help guide them through these complexities.
That's very nice, but the honor's all mine. This work, it just goes to show you, things happen organically. If you really just do what you're passionate about and you just dive into it, that's probably the right spot for you to be in. And again, I didn't think I would be in this spot
Yeah.
as having a consulting firm when I decided to go look at another family to serve it to be their non-family CEO. An advisor said to me, because I kept turning down opportunity after opportunity. It didn't seem like a right fit. And he said, well, why don't you just become a consultant to families? It doesn't seem that you're ever going to find the right family that fits. And to
Yeah.
me, I'm 56. The word consultant or consulting has a bad connotation for whatever reason. But I look at my children's generation and like consultant is where they all want to get to. And so I started thinking like, why is that? And to me, I thought being a consultant on the outside helping family offices would be transactional, and I
Mm,
wouldn't necessarily have great continuity and integration with the family. What I
yeah.
learned is through this experience is that a 1099, which I consider myself versus a W-2, has a
Yeah.
totally different relationship with the family. The family office can often be providing more value than a W-2. So I find it super rewarding to be on the outside, being that independent person and providing guidance to everybody in the system rather than being a part of the system.
I'm sure having that third party perspective, is so invaluable. And I'm curious with these families you work with. I know they range from millions to billions. And is there any prerequisite as a contractor, you kind of get to choose your clients, but they choose you? What does that look like? Do they seek you out? Do you seek them? And are there parameters in which you really look for the perfect family to work with?
So I'm very blessed to work with a great number of families. For whatever reason, they operate with a scarcity mentality and they don't refer me to many people because they're afraid we'll run out of time and bandwidth. But that being said, I've got a great connection with a lot of different advisors throughout the country who work with families. And when they get stuck or they see a problem or they know that they just want someone to lean on, they often call me. I'm always available to everybody. And so we just talk about how to help families. I've got two KPIs that I measure my success with every day. That is, how many families did we help today? It's not how many paying families did we help today. And part of helping families is helping their advisors. So I keep a tally every day. How many families did we help today? And connection and KPI number two is what not is our growth rate, because almost everybody looks at how much are we growing? Are we getting bigger? Are we getting to scale? Well, I'm intentional about not getting larger. I just want to be right and with the right families, as you mentioned. So we look at what's our retention rate, not what's our growth rate. Because if we look at our retention rate, that means we're providing value to families and things will happen organically from there. So that's how we focus. But the key prerequisite to being a client is that they really want to do the work themselves. I think in order to have dynastic legacy, dynastic intent, which is what family offices intend to do, we're creating something. We're creating a system. We're creating services for people that we'll never meet, we'll never know. And so I think the tendency is to hire advisors who are going to do the work for the family. Again, these are busy people, affluent people. They've got plenty of things to do. Asking them to actually roll up their sleeves, do the work, co-create it together with me. This shouldn't be Rich's thumbprint on your family. This should be me trying to help bring out from you where you want your family to go. So that really requires work. So if family members are not going to get involved, they're not going to work, they're not going to engage, I can't help that family. This is your family, not my family.
Yeah. And this is a great kind of segue. I want to include our audience. And so Blake Crawford has a great question when you talk about the families, if they don't want to put in the work. What value do you see in family offices outsourcing for unique services? And what does that apprehension to outsource tend to stem from? And this definitely will guide into a lot of questions I have about hiring internally or externally and nepotism. But I'd love, yeah, to include Blake's question about the value of family offices outsourcing for their unique services if they don't want to put in that particular work.
Sure. So if you look at the model, what is a family office and a particular type, which is single family office, right? The tendency there is to create all the services and the support from within. But I don't know of a single family office that doesn't outsource something at some point. So we all have to kind of admit and acknowledge and teach families that it's okay to outsource. The
Yeah.
question is, what is most important to have inside and what do you want to have outside? And that becomes a question of putting together what most family offices don't do, which is a budget and a business plan, right? Because these services aren't cheap. The technology to support it evolves and is complex. And so the training, the mentoring, and you know what? The family didn't make their business necessarily in family officing. They made
Oh,
their business in manufacturing, retail, technology, you name it. So now you're asking a family to go into business or be in a business that they may not have the skill set in. So as families evolve, particularly the startups, I highly encourage an outsourced model. A
yeah.
crawl, walk, run approach is always what's best fit for the family as you're starting out.
Yeah, absolutely. I often refer to startups or family offices can feel like startup. There is so much complexity. There's so many components. And just because you're a successful entrepreneur doesn't mean you know all things family office. So having trusted advisors and those who can really help so that you're not spread thin and wearing all hats. Um, so, we've seen pros and cons from hiring within the family and externally. How should families think about bringing outside professionals and kind of what sort of problems do you see or concerns do you see with many of the families you work with?
So to me, the core starting point is really understanding your family's governance. Whether you're going to hire somebody internally, externally, we have to create a process, a system. Who's involved in that? How are we going to measure those people as we hire them? So to me, that's governance. A lot of people don't understand truly what governance is, but governance is really the key. And so with families who are hiring external advisors, families who are hiring internal employees, I always encourage them to set up a process, an organized process that's inclusive of all the different generations, the various branches who want to participate, the internal employees, maybe even external advisors, maybe even a board member, an independent director who is part of the family's system, perhaps even a trustee. So again, it's just about establishing a process and a system, because if you make it the leading gen's challenge and decision, that's going to alienate or not engage the next gen. And next gen's looking for an opportunity, even if they may not have a voice in the final decision, certainly observing, participating, influencing, giving their input is going to help them achieve what they want, which is just to be heard, right? And that's, as a leading gen, you want engagement. So you have to allow for venues for participation. And so governance is really key. I saw Ron Diamond on here. He and I talk about it all the time. To me, governance is the heartbeat of the family. It makes the blood pump in the family. And I think it's a big miss, because I think families often hear the word governance and it's a very sterile word. And in fact, to me, governance, if you look at it from high level up, if you look at a whole family system of decisions and processes and who's in, who's out, the levers that get pulled, to me, that represents the family's culture.
Yeah.
So to me, governance equals family culture. And who doesn't want a strong family culture? And we all know from a business model sense, one of the key things to all successful businesses is the business culture and people, people, people. So really governance equals that family culture, and it really has to be intentional.
Amazing. And I've heard you speak about governance as well before, and just how in theory, it can look great on paper, but it's another thing to put it into reality. And I imagine the communication has got to be such an important factor, when you're running at 100 miles a minute and you've got all these different interests and different generations and skill sets, finding a place for each person that feels, like something that they're excited to do and they feel included. Do you help with those dynamics of communication, and are there ways in which you can help bring the family together, whether it be meetings or retreats?
I do. So I think one of the key things is that engagement, but I would question whether or not it has to be something that people really drive and have affinity towards and the expertise in, versus also maybe getting outside your comfort zone and participating in the family system and a committee that maybe is outside your comfort zone or you have no knowledge of. So I've worked with families, and of course, every family almost has an investment committee, right?
Yeah.
Families have philanthropic committees. And so you start to see where families begin to shift. And then there's lots of other committees. And so the starting point when we're trying to reimagine an existing family office or build a new one is
Mhm.
really to get the temperature of what is everyone's skill set? Where does everyone want to start? But also creating an intentional rotation system where you might start where you are comfortable in, you might start where you have knowledge in, but it's really important that you rotate to the other committees to become a full, holistic, created person to help contribute back to the family system. And I find the experiences that people might kick or roll their eyes, but once they get involved, someone who's very left-brained and who's all about the numbers, they actually find joy in the philanthropy. They might find joy in working on the family success committee, planning
Yeah.
family parties, family events. So it's about, and the people who gravitate away from the numbers and might say, oh, that's math, that's investments, that's wealth. I don't get it. I don't want to know it. Guess what? We need to make them highly educated, right?
Mhm.
We have to push them. It's about education. And so putting those people into the investment category, they begin to learn a lot. And
Yeah.
sometimes, as we know with our children, the children ask some innocent questions that are really profound. And so I think there's greatness that comes from this rotation system and having everyone participate.
It makes so much sense because you only know what you know, and you can just not see the big picture if you're not really in it, breathing it. And I think it probably helps give the family members a sense of empathy rather than pointing their fingers. Now they understand the challenges and they can work that much more effectively when they understand, yeah, each of those seats, each of those roles, and then can work effectively that much stronger together. And I'm sure some skills come naturally, like you said, in education and really helping mold maybe areas that they don't. In families, I'm sure you see a lot of soft skills and hard skills, and you probably have to strike a balance. Is there a way? It's sometimes hard to change, like you said, right brain, left brain. Um, it's really just about encouraging anything to add and how you see balancing those differences.
Well, it really is the terminology, left brain, right brain. I use it all the time with my families, and it's so great to hear them recount that back to me. So, left brain are all the technical things that families have to have, and those are very objective, quantifiable, right? The right brain is kind of the mushy stuff. It's the family dynamics. It's the qualitative part of life. It's the subjective. And so what happens in the conversation with families is that you start to use pejorative terms like soft skills or that's mushy stuff or emotional stuff or you're too emotional. And then other people who are too left brain might be criticized for being not emotional, sterile, in some pejorative terms. So what I try to get families to do is really compartmentalize number one, like there's left brain and right brain work to do. Let's
Hmm.
not use these pejorative words. Let's talk each other off the ledge. It's okay to call someone too right brain, or we need to start moving towards the center, or too left brain, we need to start moving towards the center. But really, families and these prolific families, they all need to be left brain and right brain. And I feel like we're trained very early on in life that you're either one or the other. And this duality is super unhealthy. And we
Yeah.
all know that, like, I look at them at like, if you want to use a baseball analogy, like, you got to be the best offense and you got to be the best defense, right? But Hall of Famers are great at both. And all
Yeah.
these families that we serve are Hall of Fame families. So why
Yes.
shouldn't they strive to be the best of both worlds, best on offense, best on defense? When I explain that to them, it kind of opens it up. And so again, it's another metaphor, analogy that helps families to realize that there's more potential within them. They have to strive for excellence. They may not get to where they, you know, think ultimately that they would like to get to, but we're going to start pushing and pushing and pushing high performance, reaching
Yeah.
your full potential.
I love so much of your work is really psychology and helping, the families communicate and understand each side of that coin. And growing up, I had a father who was an engineer, very A-type, and a mother who was a teacher and an artist, very creative. And so I do feel very blessed that I have both their influences and balancing, the best of both worlds. I think it's important to be able to approach these problems and grow. Um, so many dynamics and so many different sides of the spectrum that you're creating harmony. I've heard an interview with you and R. Adam Smith that was wonderful, where you talked about the founder mentality and the family mentality, and somehow sometimes these things can be very different. And how do you strike a balance there? Do you mind talking a little bit about that dynamic?
Sure. So founders mentality is a huge kind of subsurface thing that's going on that families don't even recognize. And so one, like, what is it and why does it matter? And then two, like, how does it impact the family? And so if you think of founder, I think if you look at the technical sense, and as a lawyer, we're always trying to define terms, founder is someone who started the business. But if we can expand that definition, because let's take a three-gen family who started the business, G1 got it to a $20 million company, G2 got it to a $200 million revenue company, and G3 got it to a $2 billion revenue company.
Yeah.
Well, each generation to me is a founder, not the technical sense of starting it, but that $200 million company looks nothing like the $20 million company, and the $2 billion revenue company looks nothing like the $200 million or the $20 million company. And so who really is the founder, right? And does it even really matter? Well,
Right.
it really shouldn't matter, but the fact of the matter it does. It really governs people's minds and how we're going to make decisions. Because if you really feel like you are the founder, you're the owner of this $2 billion company when you only took it to a $20 million company, there's going to be incongruency. There's not going to be there's a fight and a for control and power and who did what and future decisions, which is really it. So one, try to acknowledge within families that there can be more than one founder in this type of an example. And it's okay to celebrate each one and recognize that the $200 million company could not have started but for G1's $20 million effort and so on and so forth. But then that leads to, how do founders really think? And so each one of those three generations, if they have founder mentality, it can really be unhealthy when you become a family in a family decision process. So I got this concept, and I have to give credit to Dennis Jaffe, who talked about from paternalism to partnership. And and I kind of updated that concept and grew upon it, upon his genius in identifying that. And he wrote a book on it, which I encourage everyone to read. But to me, that means, how do founders think versus how are families going to think? And just to give a couple of examples, founders, as you know, are very entrepreneurial. There's always searching for the shiny new object, right? So they're always reactive and they're going and going. But now you shift to family decision making. And family decision making proves out that they're not going to be as reactive. They actually want to slow the process down. They want to have collaboration. So here it is, shiny new object, no governance. Let's be strategic and have collective decision making. So when you take those two and you're really not recognizing what's going on, you can understand the clashes that begin to happen within families. Another characteristic of founders, it's top-down management. Family is bottom up. So again, those are two different management styles, two different governance models. Again, governance leads to everything. And so I could go on and on about the differences, but what the key for families is to think, who's the founder? Why does it really matter? Let's define what's really happened in our multi-generational family system. And then how are we going to make decisions together and kind of recognize that founder mentality can really be unhealthy and needs to be recognized both by the founder and the family. And you got to put each other, your shoes in the other's feet, and or your feet in the other's shoes,
Yeah.
and really try to absorb it.
Yeah. That is just, there's so many dynamics. And I think, yeah, awareness and having someone, to walk and coach them through that. And I imagine too, when you think about, that founder who's driven and leading the charge, and the family who has core missions and beliefs and trying to balance the two, I imagine when you're working with multi-generational families, again, maybe that clash between holding on to kind of legacy and how things have been done and what this family stands for, when you're also trying to balance being innovative and finding new ways. And do you see a big clash in those two? And how do you really balance, I guess, legacy and innovation?
Sure. So I've got two types of families I work with. I think they're probably what everyone works with. You're either with proactive, healthy, high performing families that want to stay that way, or you're working with reactive, unhealthy, maybe families in deep conflict. So this whole legacy versus innovation, how we're going to evolve the business impacts both families the same, but the healthier you are, the easier you can adjust to it. But it's still really hard for the family members. So after this, after this conversation, I'm actually leaving to go meet with a client. It's probably one of the most healthy families I work with. Absolutely amazing. And they're actually in that kind of transition from that $20 million revenue company to well north of 200 million. And G1 could not be more proud of his children and his family that are leading that enterprise. That being said, he shows up to the meetings and
Yes.
there's a detachment. He doesn't really understand when they start talking about ERP systems
Yeah.
and why there's this multi-million dollar investment into something that's called ERP. Can't we just do it the old way?
Yeah.
Right? And what is it all about? And he sits in the meetings, becomes kind of disenfranchised, can't contribute, and feels that he's becoming inept. And that's really hard for him. And so he couldn't be more proud, but yet he's withdrawing. And he's withdrawing, and that's bothering his children who want his value, right? He can still contribute. Just because there's one part of the business that's outgrown him doesn't mean the whole business is outgrown him. And so we're working even with the healthiest families to keep,
Yeah.
as the businesses grow and get more sophisticated or change industry or add on new industries to their large portfolio of operating companies. How do you keep everyone engaged?
Yeah. And I'm curious with this example of one of the most healthy families you work with, meeting in that capacity where everyone comes together, he shows up. How often do you recommend a family do something like this? And I imagine you must travel a lot to be, there with the family guiding them.
So I think one of the key things, and I think other advisors who are here listening, like I think one of the secret sauces that allows me to help the families move and either stay healthy or get healthy is the starting point of the engagement itself. Who
Yeah.
is the client, right? So I think in most cases, the advisory community looks at who is the wealth controller, the wealth creator, who controls the vote,
Yeah.
right? And in that situation, I can't, if I took that approach, I wouldn't be able to manage between G1 and G2 in this situation
Yeah.
because there wouldn't be that trust. I come into the system understanding that I am a systems advisor, not a person's advisor, not a branch, not a generation, not a family pod, not an individual. I represent the system. So when I start my process, everybody signs the engagement letter who's either a current owner or future owner, and we go through that so I can have this trusting confidential relationship with all the members of the family, and then I can help them to navigate. So I meet with, after this call, I'm going to meet with that G1 leader. Last
Yeah.
week, I met with the G2 siblings, right, to understand where they're at. And
Yeah.
before that, I met with the G2 siblings individually. But I keep the confidences between me and them when we're meeting as a generation. Those stay confidential when I meet with the other generation. But I can then help navigate and lead the conversation and make it more natural and to kind of take away the threat. So so I meet with my clients very regularly. Uh,
Yeah.
Families don't stop on after 6 p.m. or Saturday or Sunday. So I'm with my clients on the phone, texting, on video with them as much as they need me. And but it's a joy to be able to help them stay healthy, get healthy, work towards that healthy generational continuity.
Yeah. You kind of become a member of the family. Um, this is kind of along the lines of some of the structure that you've put into place. Nancy Kier asks, in your view, what kind of support system outside of traditional wealth management actually help the next generation step into leadership with clarity? And
That's
I
a
think,
great.
yeah,
So this word education means a lot to different people, and there's so many great advisory communities out there, education systems out there, and those formal kind of processes are very important, and I think they're critical to do. But what's most important in education is having the family work together. Like
Mhm.
you have to roll up your sleeves, you have to commit the time. It's almost like a Montessori kind of experience. If the family is going to be given documents, again, told, here's your family plan, here's your strategic plan, but they haven't participated in it, they're not going to feel a part of it. So to me, the best education is showing up for the next gen to during their winter break, during their spring break, working in the summer, having annual family meetings at a minimum. I encourage at least two, one in the summer, one in the winter, meet with families. And then there's quarterly meetings that happen throughout based upon the committee structure and the governance structure. And everybody participates, everybody rotates. One of the most interesting, simple tools that I encourage my families to do, particularly if they are scattered throughout the country or world, is just pick a day of the week and have a consistent time where you're all going to get on this video and talk as a family. All right. And then you can have a cadence of, it could either be formal or informal. It could just be informal where everybody shows up who can, no pressure. It
Yeah.
can also have a cadence of, here's an agenda we're going to talk through. So once a week, everyone who can will show up and be included in the communication. So it can be that simple.
It's so simple, yet if you're not communicating on a regular basis, I mean, I get it. I live on opposite sides of the country from my family. And, there was a period there where my dad refused to get an iPhone. And we're like, come on, we communicate through text and photos. And it was a game changer, and it's just, I like that you give the tools, you give the time, the space, and it becomes a necessity. Stephanie Moore asks a really great question. She says, Rich, what are the qualities or focus areas you see with families who seem the most fulfilled and successful?
Wow, that's a great question. So I think those families, again, we talked about what are some of the characteristics that most successful businesses have, and do families and family offices take those same principles? So the first one was people, people, people. Are we intentional about our culture in the business? All the time. And that's what founders will say. That's what business leaders will say. My people are great. That's why we're successful. We sell donuts. The other businesses sell donuts. We sell more donuts and sell it more profitably because we have great people, right? Yes, families. Are you intentional about your culture with your family? They don't do that. But the second thing is, which is to answer the question, is great businesses have a strategic plan. You ask a family, do you have a family strategic plan? They look at you kind of like that Cocker Spaniel that hears the whistle with their head cocked, and they're like, what are you talking about? So really, I mean, that's the starting point, to develop a strategic plan for the family, because that's the North Star on where we are going to go as a family system. And that begins the communication. So everyone is on the same page, knowing this is where this family is going. And here's the order in which we're going to tackle these projects together.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, just having the guidance, the vision, the North Star. I love how you say that. Gets everyone aligned. Looking ahead, what trends do you see really shaping the evolution of the family office sector?
Sure. So one, the complexity, the sophistication is growing nonstop. The expenses to running family offices are increasing. Whether or not the leading gen wants to continue leading, whether the next gen wants to come on and accept that responsibility and has a skill set to do it, are all questions. And so, again, I'll refer back to Ron Diamond, who I always listen to as a great mentor and an advisor, who talks about family offices in terms of a baseball analogy, that we're in their very early stages, the very early innings of family office development and evolution. So what I'm seeing is very fragmented market, lots of starting up new family offices. Even families that don't really need a family office are forming family offices. There's so many great advisors out there, and if they're coordinated properly, you really don't need a family office, and most families don't. So the question is, if families would take the step and plan it out in a methodical way, that's how they could get to where they want to be. And so just taking an inventory of what you're really trying to do, what your purpose is for the family and the family office, begins you then to do that first question, which you asked about, which was outsource services or insource services. It's really,
Right.
what's the purpose? What's the point? What are we trying to do? But in terms of trends, I see family offices who are now club dealing with other family offices and are getting to know each other, right? That's becoming more common as this evolution, as we're getting the second inning, the third inning. They're beginning to see what other families and family offices have strengths in, and that may be a different strength than what they have. So I think I'm seeing a shared services kind of model where they're not merging together, but they're collaborating together. Hey, we can provide this service. You can provide that service. We'll figure out a system of how to support each other and compensate each other for that. So I begin to see a more multifamily family office scenario evolving to all the point of, I don't know the statistic. We see all the statistics about newly created family offices, how many are created. I don't know the statistic. I'd be curious if there's any research on it, on how many family offices are closing down, winding up, just like
Yeah.
all families
Yeah.
closed up and wound down. So uh, I see a big trend with that because, again, there's not the expertise, the expense is high. And guess what? The advisory community is sophisticated now to support many of these families. So why do it all in-house? And so I
Yeah.
see a trend of closing up. And I also see, for those that want to stay around, what I call not just customization, but radical customization.
Mm.
Families are really fighting engagement, disinterest, lack of wanting to be involved because family offices, as they started out in the first inning and second inning, as Ron would say, have
Yeah.
created sort of a homogeneous offering. Well, homogeneous offering between one generation to the other might be okay, but as that next gen begins to evolve and develop their own risk profile, their own desires, their own acumen, what they want to do, if the family office services are not just tailored, but radically tailored towards that family and that family pod and each branch, then there becomes lack of engagement. So that's why I believe a trend we'll see is, extreme customization. And the question is, can that be done with internal advisors or external advisors? And so I really see like a specialist model developing. Certainly in
Yeah.
my practice, I know I can't do it all, so I bring experts who are great at what they do and love what they do to help support families. So I think it's really this radical customization. I'd say the last trend I see is a statistic about women becoming the wealth controllers in the next generation. I think 65% of family offices will be owned or controlled by women. And so is that going to change how decisions are made, how governance structures are set up, how the family culture evolves, what that does between the relationships between men and women of wealth, right? And maybe having more wealth than their spouse. And so what does that really begin to do to the dynamic? How can we get ahead of that curve and keep the families healthy, right? As this trend and inheritance and wealth transfer really comes to light.
Wow. Incredible to really break down a lot of those statistics and those trajectories and just the evolution. I think, yeah, we are in such an exciting time. I'm very encouraged by all the collaboration. I'm really encouraged by all the impact families are making with their wealth. I'm curious if with the families you work with, I know balancing privacy with, being leaders can be tricky. And do you see in the future that more families will become more public facing? And, are there trade-offs to remaining private?
I think it's obviously that's a family by family approach. I also see it being kind of geographically kind of driven too. My family clients in the Midwest corridor, the central part of the US, have
Yeah.
really kind of a different approach than families on the East Coast and West Coast. And the East Coast and West Coast families, I'm not going to make a generalization or about the center folks, but there really is kind of a different philosophy. I think it also will boil down to uh, philanthropy versus
Yeah.
business reasons. So some families like to do anonymous giving. Others believe it's really important to show their name. And,
Yes.
and generationally, there can be differences. Branch wise, it can be difference. From a business perspective in the investment area, some families are finding it really important to have branding associated with their families so that they can work with other family offices of a certain kind and be known that they're of a certain brand, that they can be active and helpful participants, not just writing a check, but adding value to families, other family offices, and having that club deal participation. And the best way to do it is to get your name out there and brand yourself a certain way. Now, it may not be called the Smith Family Office, it could be called some other name. And I think families are moving away from using their name and
Mhm.
using actually the word family office and into other kind of names, like unique names that aren't tied to the family and aren't using the words family office in their name anymore.
Yeah. It's exciting. I love the world of marketing, and to see families embrace this fresh approach to marketing for the many reasons. But you touched on the philanthropy and how many choose to do it publicly or privately. And Steve Snyder has a great question. He says, "Can you speak to the role of philanthropy in creating purpose and intergenerational cohesion?"
So philanthropy is obviously, to me, one of the cores to having healthy generational continuity, creating all this wealth and then not deploying it to have impact and social good, and also finding the innate talents within family members to help them engage. So there's so many ways to do it, and it's absolutely important. I view myself as helping, again, using a baseball analogy, to help
Yes.
families get around first base, maybe to second base when it comes to philanthropy planning, but you got to really have an expert philanthropy strategist to really help dive deep with the family. So once I open up their hearts to it, once I
Yes.
open up and explain the tax benefits to it, because some are tax driven when it comes to
Yes.
philanthropy, others are just driven by their heart to do it. Again, left brain, right brain, they should be thinking about both. Then we need to get them to a philanthropy expert who can help nurture that and really do it the best way. Again, these families deserve not just good, not just okay, but the very best professional advisors for that segment of what they need. And I'm committed in that kind of fiduciary model to providing a Rolodex to my clients to have those best advisors.
So valuable. I mean, it's complex, exactly. And what is the goal? Is it an impact investment? Is it a charitable LLC, a donor advised fund? I mean, there's just so many different vehicles, and I guess it all depends on, yeah, what is the purpose for that individual family. So yeah, your Rolodex could become the family office list. Well, we would not be speaking if it weren't for Ron, and so I have to make time for Ron's question. Ron says, first off, Richard is, in my opinion, the best in class working with family offices on governance. I highly recommend him. Question for Richard: why do you think that after having a liquidity event, almost all family offices start with investing? Where should they start with governance? Is it like a foundation of a house? One quick comment: at Booth, we refer to governance, as a power skill, not a soft skill.
Wow, power skill. That's really profound. I'm learning from Ron right now.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. Um, so if families would invest the time in pre-liquidity planning, gosh, that's a great thing. It's so hard for them to do when they know they're going to have a sale, right? I always tell them when they come to me and they say, we're going to have this liquidity event. Help us after the sale or help us now. What do we do? So,
Yeah.
well, you need to commit because right now you've got two pillars of time commitment, pre-liquidity. You're running your business. You're trying to optimize the revenue. You're trying to optimize your expenses so you get that multiple that you really want. So you're focused heads down in the business. Second thing, you're getting ready to do the transaction. Once you get in the transaction, the diligence room, the negotiation, all the contracts and consulting agreements and employment agreements and covenants and the carried interest versus not carried interest, how you're going to structure that, right? So then you're going to be in that. Now you're asking to do pre-liquidity planning on top of it. Can you really make the commitment to do it? So I tell families 2, 3 years out is the best time to do it. 1 year out, it's getting close and it's going to be stressful. Can you really do it? But to answer Ron's question, you get that cash influx. And the question is, what do you do with it? Right. And most families have advisors who aren't necessarily helping them to be prepared post liquidity. But
Yeah.
as soon as that transaction happens, taxes, distributions, right? Expectations. Are family members who sold the business all exiting the business? Are some exiting and some staying on with a new boss? Maybe a
Yeah.
private equity firm. They have a new boss and they've got a carried interest and they feel like they're responsible for
Yeah.
that. And then you talk about the question of all their consulting agreements and employment agreements and family members. So this pre-liquidity planning is so important to do. If you're going to do it post-liquidity, it does become an immediate financial investment, wealth management, family office, and a tax, if you're smart, a tax family office too that's trying to do tax planning if you haven't already done it in advance. And again, there's so many misses when families don't do that smart tax planning in advance of the sale. And so it just evolves from there. But that's what I see all day, every day.
There is so much there, and you're right. I'm sure operating a business, seeing that finish line is the sale. That's where it almost begins. That's where now you have to manage that money, all that complexity, and yeah, it's different for each family. So that governance is so key, and thinking about it in advance. Ah, let's see. I know we're getting close. There are so many questions. What I will do is, because I always feel bad when there's amazing questions in the chat that we didn't get to, I am able to download those. I will send them to Richard. We will look over them. We will do our best, if they weren't already addressed, to try to get you answers and feedback. Let's see. Okay, we'll go. I mean, there's just so many of them. Teresa. Here's Stiv. I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong. You mentioned you're 56. My dad's the same age, and we sometimes talk about how different our perspectives are. I'm curious, do you think family offices truly take Gen Z-led startups seriously, or do they still prefer more experienced, older founders who might feel easier to bet on?
I'm assuming the question is, do family offices invest in early stage companies?
Yep.
And the answer is absolutely. Some family offices certainly do invest and have that asset category as early stage. In fact, I've got multiple families who look at early stage companies, and why? One, it's the excitement of it. Two, these entrepreneurs what really drives entrepreneurs, these successful people at the end of the day? Is it getting another comma behind their name, a couple more zeros? That's nice, but what they really are, they love developing people. They love developing the potential of an idea. So if they love developing the idea of people and potential of idea, startups are great for them, but it's not for everybody. So I think, again, it's trying to identify which family office that is suitable for that. And then do they have the particular skill that's going to help you leverage your startup? So, finding a family office who's interested in startups, but they don't know anything about your field isn't what we call smart money. It's money, but it's not the smart money. It's going to help you move forward. So I think trying to identify those family offices who, one, have a proclivity or an asset category for startups, and two, have expertise in your business is how to start.
100%. Great question. And I think that is an amazing note to end on. I know we could just do a full another hour. I can't believe how quickly that hour ran by. And I can't thank you enough to everyone, to the audience, for your great questions. To you, Richard, I know you have such a busy schedule. You're leaving tomorrow to be with a family. So thank you for making time for us all today and sharing this incredible wisdom with us. And before we wrap up, what's the best way for people to connect with you online?
Either go to LinkedIn, it's Richard Wolkowitz, or you could go to xylogenesis.com, XYLOGENESIS.com.
And we all know now the amazing story behind the name. Quick reminder for the audience before I hit pause. This is recorded, so if you know other advisors, other families that would benefit from the conversation, I will send a recording tomorrow. I have also dropped my LinkedIn in the chat. Would love to connect, continue conversations with anyone. And there is an exclusive promo code, Richard's Masterclass, for anyone interested in exploring what will soon be Family Office Access Platform. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And Richard, I look forward to following your work and appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Danielle. I can't wait to see your next masterclass with some other experts so I can learn more.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Everyone have a great day.